So welcome everyone. I hope you are enjoying your time at the Pyohio conference. I'm Denise Williams. I have a plethora of things about me, but the main thing that you come to know is I do a lot of different things. So I've been doing development like data science for a number of years. I also own my own tech consulting business. So I help people build MVPs for typically early stage founders to build their first app. So we'll just talk a bit about kind of how I got here. So this was a Kaggle event, 5-day GenAI course that they were doing. And at the same time, I was experiencing some challenges at work with a colleague of mine. We were looking to transition to Snowflake and changing from our SQL server and making some updates, and he was not very happy about that change and the way we were going, and so he basically became very unhelpful as he decided to transition out of where I worked at the same time. So that's what this was inspired by. Oftentimes we work in places where we don't document well, and then we lose that tribal knowledge. And so around the time I was doing the Kaggle, I was like, okay, I think this would be a great thing to build to help me and my team. So let's go forward. So that was really my story, but you got legacy databases, right? SQL Server, whatever they're using at that particular point. And you have basically people who don't document what they're doing. There's a lot of knowledge between disparate places. Things live in disparate places, and then when you need to understand, you got to go to that direct person. So that was my kind of issue. When you then have an SME who doesn't want to be quite as cooperative, when you have lots of questions, or you want to get information about what's there. And then if you need to query or build a view or build a stored procedure, is there any type of data dictionary? None of that type of stuff exists. You have a question? Yes, subject matter expert. So when your SME ghosts you, so he was a subject matter expert in where I was working, and like I said, he decided to leave. And so the question is, what happens when he leaves? What do you do? Either you have people that are still there that know a bit, but a lot of it has to be like relearning. You got all these databases, or you're trying to make a transition. So that's how this started, to give you some background. All right. So my use case. The idea is I wanted to kind of automate and generate documentation from databases. I figured, could I use AI to do this? That was my whole goal. Could I use it to tell me the schema? Could I use it to ask business questions? Could I use it to produce an entity relationship diagram? Could I get it to do those things so that I wouldn't have to rely on somebody telling me that knowledge, that I could use natural language processing in order to do that? So the idea here is we're auto-generating. I want to be able to eventually track changes over time. So as people are updating, adding new databases, they are creating new views, stored procedures, maybe different queries that are set up. Provide just this quick schema overview. So nothing intensive at this point for the tool. And then be able to just support Q&A. That's really what the basis of it as an MVP was to build. Okay? So then the solution. So I thought, okay, in a Kaggle notebook, which is the requirement for a Kaggle competition, you have to build this for submission. So what I did was I chose to use Gemini 2.5 Flash-Lite as the model. I used SQLite to help build some databases in the agent. And then I used Python, obviously. We're at a Python conference. I used Python to do a lot of the code from that perspective. And so right now, you can see a schema summarization, table summarization in the agent. There's an ERD generation portion, as well as you can ask it questions in natural language. All right, so right now it connects to a DB, just a couple tables that I created using SQLite, like customers, products, things from that nature. Then we go into some code snippets that I wrote in order to put in the model, put in what the tables would be, creating the tables, all of that portion, okay? And then originally, so this is iteration number 3. I had a first iteration where I thought, oh, I'll use a command line interface to build this and do the interaction portion. Then I went away from that for a period of time and built another iteration, and this is the 3rd iteration that you're seeing currently that I actually submitted for the Kaggle competition. Next, coming up with my prompt engineering strategy. What was I going to prompt it? What instructions was I going to build in order for it to be able to be useful? So if I need to ask business questions, I wanted to give it some context. So I went through building kind of system instructions of what it should be able to answer from that perspective. And we're going to go through this with the demo. I'm just giving you some kind of background so you'll get to see it in action. And then there's some output that you can see. You can ask for it and mark down if you choose at this time, but I'm looking to do some other things with it. All right, so I call this the SME Ghost Protocol, right? Because one, database documentation agent is cool, right? But SME Ghost Protocol just has a different ring to it. To think of where we came from with kind of the SMEs, the fact that our SME ghosted us. Like I said, he did ultimately leave the organization, and we lost a lot of information when he left. Hopefully we can prepare so that won't happen again. And so this idea of preserving your tribal knowledge, being able to accelerate onboarding from this, because you bring in new people, they don't have to spend necessarily sometimes sitting with another subject matter expert. They can ask questions and get results, and then be able to talk to, that lead developer or the lead database person, because they'll understand a bit more on their own. And then document systems that nobody wants to touch. When you work in a lot of organizations, there's legacy systems that are just, let's just say it's spaghetti code in a lot of ways. And so people don't want to unpack that. They don't want to figure out what to do. They know they need to use it on a day-to-day basis, but oftentimes they are not spending a lot of time. They just go through the motions of what they do on a regular basis, and they try to get through the bugs of the system as opposed to having a newer system or understanding more about the system because it was inherited. And that was a lot of what happened here. So, lessons learned. This project, I have a background in being an analyst, a data scientist, a project manager. So that's the way I approached this. As I looked at it as a project, and I built out requirements for myself in order to build this. I really wanted to spend some time working with LLMs and how I could think about things for the future. And for everything else that we do, how could we leverage this new technology? And then, obviously, human review still matters. You still need humans in the loop. even when we're talking about AI. But this takes a considerable less amount of time than somebody manually trying to go in every single database and figure out tables and reading through code. Just from that perspective. And then I leveled up my own SQL and coding skills. Like I said, I had just recently been a project manager, so I hadn't even been doing SQL and coding for a while. I'd really just been PMing. And as I came in, did you have a question? No, okay. As I came into this space and I thought about this project, I said, what would Denise build? Using her prior knowledge. I used to build with Python. I used to do a lot of things, and that's how this came to be. So things I'm thinking about as far as future enhancements, once you see the tool. DB support, so using different databases. Right now we're using SQLite, but if you want to use Postgres, if you want to use MySQL, from that perspective, building kind of a user interface for the person to interact with, as opposed to how it's set up currently, that they would be able to put it alongside a screen and be able to do the same work, but it would be intuitive from that perspective. Scheduled syncs, that you could actually make changes in the agent and have to make changes for the database to approve. And then integrating with things like obviously GitHub and other things that we as developers use. So if you're using like Confluence or Jira, from that perspective, or like a Bitbucket from there. All right, are we ready to see the actual database documentation agent? All right, I'm gonna go out of here. All right, so SME Ghost Protocol. Here it is in a Kaggle notebook. I'm gonna run through a lot of these cells, and I'll tell you obviously what's happening at each thing. So, when your SME ghosts you, a GenAI-powered solution for database documentation. So there is some markdown in here that I built for the submission to really explain the project. So you're gonna see that, and I'll glance over it, and then we'll get into more of what the actual agent does. So just kind of an overview. This is the database documentation agent. It's a GenAI-powered assistant designed to help analysts, product managers, data professionals quickly understand and interact with relational databases, especially unfamiliar or undocumented ones. Basically, the primary persona that I built this for, I called them Alexis. It's a business systems analyst, frequently receives SQLite data dumps from an internal teams with little to no documentation. And she needs to understand schemas, relationships, and data content quickly in order to validate logic, business logic, design reports, or draft integration specs. So for my PMing, I like to have like a persona, a person I'm building this for. What would they be doing? So here are kind of our MVP capabilities. Automatically extracts and summarizes table schemas using Gemini. Allows users to ask natural language questions about the schema. Generates AI-powered SQL queries based on business-style questions. And explains them in plain English for the user. And then visualizes the schema as an ER diagram with primary and foreign key connections. And then I also have a mock-up, but we won't go through that today. So the main thing is right now, this is very self-contained here. We would build it, obviously, for someone else to be able to use. This was, like I said, the submission. It wouldn't work necessarily in a SQL server at the moment, but the idea is to build future enhancements so that you could. So this is just my kind of project development workflow. I started with the use case definition. I built a PRD, so product requirements document. When I built this, because I built this myself, I did it as an agile sprint planning session. So I had milestones for myself to get it built. This is, me and my PM mind. And if I were giving the work to other people, This is the process that I went through each week as I worked on building this. And then iterative, like I said, I went through 3 iterations. The first one, I did the command line interface. It worked, but there was things I didn't like about it. So I went away from that. So outcome, a working prototype. I translate structured database metadata into human-friendly insights using GenAI. All right, so first step, we set up our Gemini API key. That's really the first step here. And I am using Gemini 2.5 Flash-Lite. Originally, I was using Gemini 1.5, I think it was Flash 001, but it was deprecated, so I had to change it right before this talk. So that's successful. Next, we do our setup. We set up our databases here. So we use SQLite, and I use some pandas, and basically I have 4 tables, just a customers, products, orders, and order items table. So next step, we're going to run this cell. And pretty quick, as you can see, I got like create tables in there to build some things. Some sample data that I added in, all done. Pretty simple, pretty quick. Got a question? You want to make it bigger? Let's see. Better? All right. Huh? So, trying to hold this and do that, like, not working. So, database schema initialized, our tables are created. Now we have our schema extraction. So the way I built this is I did an abstract with the JSON format to help it use Gemini, just as a way to get this to run a bit simpler for the project. So here you can see our structure schema in our JSON here. So you have all the different tables here, so customers, all the column IDs of what's in there, orders. I'm gonna keep going. So next, now actually we're doing something. So here, I wanted to get table summaries of the tables that were built. So that's what this block of code is doing, using Gemini 2.5 Flash-Lite. So we'll stop here. As you can see, it generated some table summaries. So it's telling us about those particular tables that I created. So first is the customers table. It's telling you it serves as a central repository for all customer information. It stores essential details such as contact information, name, email, phone number, primary address, enabling targeted customer segment. And I'm not going to go through every one of these. Engagement, support. But that was kind of the initial, right? I got these table summaries for each table. That each table you can see generated from GenAI, you can learn more about that table in kind of a paragraph format, just a summary. So my next step was build this Q&A over the schema. And I wanted to be able to just put in natural language. I wanted to ask a specific question. So that's what this block is doing. And at the bottom, we'll ask a question. So as you see, I built in this prompt that says you're a helpful assistant. A user has asked a question about a database schema. Use the schema below to answer as accurately and clearly as possible. Just some basic examples. Here's a few questions to get us started, but I wanted to see what it would produce. So these are the examples. So what table references the product table? Order items table references the product table. Simple in English. It answered those 3 questions. What columns are used to link the orders and customers table? How can I find out which products a customer ordered? And then as you see below here, it tells you what joins needed to happen. So from SQL, it says join the customers and orders, connect customers to orders using customer ID. This will link each order to the customers who placed it. So for somebody who's not as well known as how to, do some joins and build some things, it kind of gives you that piece of information here. And this was just a sample SQL query to achieve this. So that's what I started out with. All right. Next, now we can interact with it. So first I did some system instructions. I wanted to see kind of what the result, the output would be. Now, when we run this block of code, we can actually ask the question. So enter an interactive Q&A mode. You can type exit to quit, clearly. And we're going to ask a schema question. So, I can project my voice. Something else you probably don't know about me is I used to be a principal. For K through 12, yes. But here, for Gemini, we asked the question, what is the schema for the products table? It gave us back, the schema is as follows. Here's the product ID, it's an integer, it's our primary key. Product name, description, right. So I put this section in so you can be able to ask just simple questions. Whatever you need to learn. I'm thinking of it from the prospect of a learning tool, right, to help on board from that perspective. So our next block, yes?
Is it idle sensitive? If you misspell something, is it sensitive or you
No, it's not. If you misspell something, it'll still give you the correct response. All right, I'm going to exit. So we can move on. All right. So then I decided to do this advanced query insights, right? So now I'm going to be able to ask business questions, not just what a schema is or how to do something. I want to ask actual insights from what's there. So this, I go to this next section that we're going to run. All right, so here, I'm asking a question. How many products? I don't have to say that, but it's me. All right, so it generated the SQL query for me. It gave me a count back. I made this real simple. And then it broke it down for us. So it breaks down what the query is doing in terms, right? So now it tells you what select is, from products, what's happening from this perspective. Okay? So everything you can see tells you what the query is asking, in English, it gave you the query, and it gave you what the result would be. So you can ask a myriad of questions, but for this demo, I'm going to ask that one. So I'm going to exit. So now, I wanted to be able to visualize. This is one of my hardest parts, to be able to kind of visualize what the tables and the relationships between. I spent a lot of time on this one, because I was trying to get the right Python library to basically generate what I needed it to generate with this perspective. So that's what's happening in this code. So we're going to visualize in an ARD diagram. So down here. So as you can see, it kind of gives us this visual. Because I know everybody's not just, you read it, you learn it, you got it. Sometimes you need to see an actual visual. So that was kind of the last step in this. And then we kind of talked about future enhancements, where I'd like to go a bit. So I have a couple different ideas of whether it's going to be like a Streamlit app or it's going to be something else, just so you are aware. But that's really the demo. And if you do have
I was wondering, like, um, almost all the databases today, like Oracle, SQL, Postgres, etc., if you host it in cloud, they have this natural language query capabilities. You can straight ask the question and you give you results on the table. And I was wondering if you tried that to generate your, documentation or ERG diagrams.
So I know Oracle, they're working on their Fusion, their AI agent studio portion, and I've seen some of it, but I haven't used it from that perspective. At work, we use primarily SQL Server. So that is what I was initially building it for, right? And we are using different versions. So one is like on-prem, and one is like a virtualized.
Was that hosted in cloud? No.
No, not currently. But we are transitioning to Snowflake as an enterprise. So obviously that will look a little different as we go forward. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes?
You gonna capture queries to the database and use that for building documentation? The actual queries to make that with the management where a lot of that knowledge resides.
So that is eventually a future enhancement, to be able to kind of track that, what queries people are using, them using kind of the natural language processing interface to actually make the changes as opposed to going directly to SQL Server or from that perspective. So yes, that I have thought about that, and I would like to build something that helps to do. Anybody else questions?